some spare, there's one spare seat right by me. There's a couple down the front as usual. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming this evening. My name is Chris Ashman. I'm the Director of Regeneration at the Isle of Wight Council. Been in post since February this year. As you probably gather from my dulcet tones, I'm not from this part of the world. Most of my regeneration experience over the last 25 years has been in South Wales. And since arriving on the island, it's become a place like home, really. Quite a rural community, small market towns, some challenging issues in terms of regeneration. But I think what's totally similar is the friendliness and the community spirit that I've experienced since I've been here on the Isle of Wight. And to a great degree, this evening is about tapping into that, your willingness to join us this evening, your willingness to help us identify priorities for regeneration in this part of the island. We've got a lot to get through, and I'm really grateful for your time. I'm going to give you a brief presentation which talks around why we're here this evening, but I wanted to begin really by emphasising, from our perspective, this is a beginning of a conversation. I'm sure a lot of you have been involved in consultation type events, possibly, hopefully dissimilar to this, where there's been an engagement, the comments have been listened to or not. Sometimes you may not have heard what the result of that might have been, but in essence, you wait then until the next one or the next one and see what happens. What we want to do and emphasise tonight is that clearly, from the numbers we've got here this evening, there's a real appetite and an interest in regenerating this part of the island. But clearly, you as a group of people will only be a snapshot of what those ideas and views would be. We know, because we've done a lot of work since we've been in post looking at the statistics, that we haven't got a representative cross-section of people here tonight. I just need to look at the room. So that's why I wanted to emphasise this is the beginning of a conversation. We'll need to do specific sessions with people in smaller parts of the area around Ryde. We'll need to work with particular interest groups, those representing people with disabilities, those people who work with young people more specifically. So we see this very much this evening as a beginning of that conversation. Why are we having the conversation? The Isle of Wight needs regeneration for a whole range of reasons, but primarily so that it can see itself having a sustainable future. The young people that live here at the moment can see a prospective future. The people that live here and have come here to enjoy the remaining years of their life can see a productive and beneficial future. And it's important that we identify that the Isle of Wight has its challenges as an island, but crucially, and ever more so from looking at the statistics of different parts of the island, that actually there are different challenges in different parts of the Isle of Wight. And therefore, one-size-fits-all solutions to the whole of the island aren't going to work, because what works for somebody living in Ryde may be a completely different challenge to somebody living in freshwater. So we've begun, and this is our very first one tonight, so bear with us in terms of us trialling the method tonight. We welcome your feedback as we go along as to whether we've got enough pace, whether you're enjoying the discussions, whether the outputs are being captured properly, because we want to improve these as we move on. So I'm going to start with a very brief presentation which talks about the regeneration programme overall, talks a bit about the statistics, gives you some feedback from the Wight We Want survey, which we launched during the summer. We've had 1,800 responses to date from people all across the island, and we wanted to share what people from Ryde have been saying in response to that questionnaire. I'm going to then turn the evening over to you. I've got some colleagues from different parts of the council who kindly offered to facilitate the tables this evening. And we want to try and capture your reactions to the statistics, your reactions to the issues that are raised, and try and get some consensus around what the priority issues that need attention in this part of the island are concerned. Why is it an issue, and what kind of outcome will we seek to try and achieve? We're not going to get all the answers here tonight. We want to come back again in January and talk to you about, okay, that's what you told us about issues. These are the existing actions that people are taking to try and tackle them. But what more do we need to do? What kind of ideas and actions we need to take to actually address those issues? So we're not going to solve it all this evening. I'd say, emphasise, it's very much a beginning of that conversation. So over the last few months, since we've become appointed, we've been trying to shape a programme that looks at the different parts of regeneration. If I ask everybody in this room, which I won't, what their view of regeneration is, I'll probably get, I think we've got about 50 people here this evening, maybe 45, 40 different answers. But in essence, the concept of regeneration has very much a physical improvement focus to it, in terms of new buildings, in terms of improving the street scene. It's become very much a dominant part of the concept of regeneration. Up until, I would say, the beginning of the 21st century, when there was a recognition that in order for regeneration to work properly, you needed to look at the softer side of things. You needed to look at people's skills. You needed to help communities develop and grow their capacity. And that's moved on to such an extent that the health benefits, particularly of regeneration, are now absolutely vital. Unless you actually see an improvement in people's well-being, in terms of their overall prosperity and their physical condition, the quality of their housing, how can you ever be confident that you've achieved successful regeneration? As you could probably gather, trying to address all of that at the same time is going to take 5 or 10 years to actually achieve, agree and set some targets and achieve progress. So what we want to do is build that agenda, build that strategy from the bottom up. Hence the area of regeneration part of the programme. The Council's already come forward with some ideas around some key projects, some of which, in relation to the Ryde area, we put on the display boards. That some historic, in terms of the Esplanade, for example, some new opportunities in terms of extending existing business park. Those are opportunities around physical regeneration. But at the same time, if they're to be successful, they need to embed and relate to skills and housing and needs of each of those areas. I'm stepping back so that we can make sure that you see. You're looking exactly good, thank you. So what we've decided to do is think about the island actually in different segments of populations of 30,000 people. Why 30,000? Well actually, if you were to consider the needs as we're doing in this presentation of some of the local areas, actually making a change in those very local areas is not very efficient. So asking a service provider in the health sector or in providing skills learning to actually just do something because there's a specific issue in that little village, it's not efficient, and services won't be able to do that. But what you can do is you can expect to see a reasonable change in the way things are delivered at a population of at least 30,000. That should provide the economy of scale necessary to enable things to be done differently. So we've looked at the geography, we've looked at the population distribution, and those are the areas that we come up with. And that area obviously we're focusing on tonight is the Ryde area. Whilst that contains Ryde Town, there are the smaller villages there of St Helens and Benbridge nearby that have their own issues and their own agenda that obviously an area regeneration programme will need to consider. So Ryde is the first one tonight, and over the next few weeks we're going to be taking a tour of the island and getting that snapshot as you're providing tonight of local issues and priorities. That will all be distilled then into those priorities that we talk about in January. That will then feed into a regeneration area plan for this part of the island. Okay, I won't repeat myself. What we're going to cover now is the data and survey. We're then going to have workshops, 2 workshops, where we look at the economic and social issues affecting the area as portrayed in the data. and your own views on that. We'd like you to, in a second workshop, to think about what your vision, if you to think of one word for the future of this area, what would you use? What word would you use to describe that vision? I am going to ask the table leads, and again, it's with your cooperation, when we get to that point, in terms of social media being very much part of our agenda, our communications agenda for this. If you're happy as tables to have your photograph taken by the facilitator with your word for vision for the future. If you're not quite happy, just refuse to do that. But it would be useful for us to capture your images, your word, your vision for the future as part of the process. Then we're going to have a, time permitting, we're going to have a prioritisation exercise. So you will come up during your session with a flip chart sheet of issues, and we'll have all of those issues displayed on the panels at the end of the evening, and everyone will get, nothing if not democratic, everyone will get a sticky dot to prioritise their specific issue. Okay? Don't worry if you forget all this, the facilitators will remind you, and obviously we'll press on with the evening. So that's what we're here to do. I just want to talk now about Ryde in terms of the statistics. Regeneration, as you saw, is about a lot of range of different issues. There will be, again, I'm guessing, potentially 30 or 40 different priorities in this room. Our view is we should be looking at the issues where this part of the island is in deficit. If it's actually lagging behind on a specific issue, if there are higher rates on a particular issue, then we should be challenging that as part of the regeneration programme and understanding it more. So Ryde's got the second largest population area on the island, and clearly in terms of the mix, we've got some specific issues in the centre of the island which we put on the display plans for you to consider later. There are some very focused ward issues in relation to St John's, for example, and also in relation to Seaview and Bembridge, some quite surprising statistics in terms of issues such as pension credits, for example. JSA, the job seekers allowance. Again, very concentrated numbers and specific issues around particular localities. We just highlighted some of the areas there where there's a higher than average rate. So you might argue, what's happening then in terms of employment guidance, training opportunities, being focused and targeted on those particular areas to enable better access to opportunity. Again, what we put here on the bottom is the average for the island overall in terms of people living in poverty, children in poverty, and or the numbers of people, families claiming child benefit overall. So we have obviously a specific concentration. There are issues in relation to this eastern part of the area. Again, St John's. Households then in fuel poverty. There is a measure for this in terms of then the proportion of income that's spent on actual heating homes. So we clearly have an issue again in some of those specific areas around a challenge around fuel poverty, higher than average compared to the island as a whole. And something that I actually miss desperately from South Wales is the level of diversity on the island. But Ryde and our particular ward has the second highest black and minority ethnic population. So again, recognising that there may be particular disadvantages in terms of that community, how are services responding to those particular issues? And again, in the area itself, the second highest number of pension credit households in those specific areas, recognising again, how are the advice and guidance services, how is advice and support in terms of welfare being provided in terms of those communities. Okay, moving on to the survey. That data sample is just a small sample of the area profile that we've developed to help inform the strategy for the different parts of the island. And in essence, what we picked out there are some of the key issues to help inform further discussion. So in terms of the Wight We Want survey, again, it was open to everybody across the island. And what you'll see there is quite an interesting spike in terms of the numbers of people and the age group of people that are actually responding to this. As I say, we've had 1,800 so far, and the majority are in that 45 to 54 age group. It's only been available online up to now, and obviously we want to open that up so we get another range of opinion. And what we've got really is a summary of some of the key issues that have been identified. So top of the list there was transport, obviously in terms of ferries, but also in terms of affordability of public transport in general. Jobs coming forward, then is the top issue. Second issue, children's leisure coming across quite strongly given the campaign in relation to Ryde Arena. And clearly a clear consensus from the survey around what the top issues needed to be. And I say that's the purpose of this evening. What you want to keep, as I'm talking, is keep in mind, is that my experience? Do I agree with that? That's what we'll be revisiting when we have the table sessions in a few minutes. So then, this kind of word cloud, so whatever people have said in terms of the responses in the survey, if it's more frequent as a response, then the bigger the words, yeah? So again, it's just a different way of capturing some of that feedback, and you can see some of the fixed link, interestingly. I don't know whether anybody made a specific effort to promote those who support fixed link completing the survey, not quite sure. But actually it stands out quite a lot in this part of the island as being quite a significant issue. Retail, obviously green areas, and unsurprisingly, potentially the ice rink is a key issue. So again, people who agreed strongly agreed with the following statements. So this is about what's good about the area, and in the first part of the session this evening, we want to get your thoughts about what's the best asset that we experience living in the area. And what we've got here clearly are some issues in relation to opportunity and recognising that safety is very good. The quality of broadband is good. So again, some high rates here in terms of opportunity and good access to healthcare. Contradictory possibly with some of the transport issues. We need to unpick some of those answers a bit more, and I welcome your help here. Some saying transport's good, others maybe not so good. So again, what we like most about the area, again, this is important for us because what we want to do is build on the strengths, utilise those assets, concerns around housing, the mix and affordability of housing, and the standards and overall experience of the education system, possibly at the higher end, but also those who maybe haven't achieved at all. So we asked people then what they felt was their biggest concern for the immediate future, and what came out was having enough money to live on, given the challenges we've all been facing in budget terms. Education as a real concern going forward, possibility of sustaining and keeping health. So some quite interesting specifics, biggest concern. So what I wanted to show you here is, again, not reading each of the individual slides, but if you look at the clusters of development, proposed developments, yeah? Whether they're housing developments, infrastructure improvements, proposed improvements to employment premises, you'll see where the clusters of proposals exist. So there's an issue here about how you manage development. So whilst there may be a need to see more housing, grow jobs because people are concerned about employment, how do those integrate properly? How do they integrate with the existing community? So this is an important agenda for the regeneration programme, is to how to best add value to people's lives in the area, not compound problems such as housing running ahead, facilities not being able to keep up and catch up with that agenda. So I just thought I'd show you where the clusters of proposed opportunities are currently lying. And then just focus on those two projects which we put on the display panel. Clearly, historically, this is a really important regeneration project for the island. As part of the access to the Isle of Wight, the esplanade in particular, and the interchange that provides is absolutely vital. It's the first impression of the island. It actually gives them quite a bit of scope for actually transforming people's perception of the Isle of Wight. So in terms of it being a priority for the regeneration programme, that's almost a given. I think what we've been doing in the first few months is revisiting all the previous ideas and plans that have been developed over recent years, and trying to identify which of those could actually deliver market opportunity in the next five years. So to look at the mix between opportunity, how the funding for a better interchange might exist, how the relationships between bus and rail might work, and what types of opportunities might exist on Ryde Gateway further along the Esplanade. And these are the kind of headline thoughts at the moment in terms of the potential mix and uses of that site, and again, we want your ideas this evening as to how that site, what your vision for that potential opportunity might be. And the other project I mentioned earlier is the existing business park at Nicholson Road. The council owns the land next door to that, so there's an opportunity to think about extending that in terms of creating more jobs, but also thinking about how the impact of that then in terms of other developments that are planned, particularly around housing in and around that area, how can we effectively manage that and achieve those outcomes. So we've done some very headline architects' concept designs, identifying the types of units and the types of facilities that could be added to that part of Ryde. But again, what we want to do is get your thoughts on what the priorities for the area should be and how we incorporate those into the thinking and detailed design of that project. Okay, that's enough from me, more than enough, I'm sure some people are thinking. What I'd like to do now is we move into our workshop sessions, if that's okay. As I say, each table has got a facilitator. I just want to make sure that we've got everybody here from our colleagues from facilitation this evening. Yep. Yep. Brian, join one of these tables,
I'm
Brian?
here.
Yeah. You're there? Okay, good. Don't have somebody for that table yet, do we? So, Heather, could you? If that's okay, yeah. So, facilitator will join you. The objective of the first session will be to consider economic and social issues. But we'd like you to start off by just listing what you think to be the 5 greatest assets of this area. That's okay. You might want to just, again, people may not know each other. You might want to just briefly introduce each other, your interest in regeneration, and then obviously we're going to spend the next just nearly under an hour covering task A and task B on your programme. Has anybody got any questions about the process before we start?
What do you want to tell us about on
So we're going into group sessions now, and then I will live stream again when we finish those. So catch you all again later. Keep watching.